and welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend Charles.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because today we pick up our discussion of the Farseer Trilogy with Book 2, Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb.
That's exactly what we're here to do, Charles. I think we had an awesome time discussing the first book in this series, Assassin's Apprentice, and just rolling right through to the next one. We're going to get through this whole trilogy probably within another couple weeks now, so it's already been quite a ride, and we really haven't discussed this at all off the air, this second book. So
we've been pretty good. I'll say before we do our famous spoiler warning that I really enjoyed reading this. I was on a summer, I took my summer vacation, if you will, and I was just downing this story. Getting very into it. It's so well written, and I even started a little bit of the third book as well, which we're not going to get into today, but we have not. And have you read this book before, Dylan? I don't think so, right?
I have not.
Okay, so we got a first-time response.
A decade plus ago, I read the first book, Assassin's Apprentice, then reread it for our previous episode, and now this is all new territory for me. And
fantastic.
I never quite made it to book 2. I went over my mixed feelings about Assassin's Apprentice I had over a decade ago. In our previous episode, and I also went over how my feelings have changed, how they've gotten more positive after the reread, and then they remain positive after this second book. I'm excited to get into the deep depths of spoiler territory.
I'm excited as well, and the only other thing I'll say is, our first discussion, Assassin's Apprentice, went over very well, actually. I was surprised by the reception to it. I wasn't sure. When you pick up a book that was released in 1995, I think it was, and even though it's a classic, are you still going to get the interest level of that you would get from a popular book that's coming out today? And the answer is definitely yes, you can, with the power of Robin Hobb. So super exciting to see that kind of attention as well, and we're excited to just keep it going.
Yeah, that was our most downloaded episode, at least the first week wise. That was the best week an episode has had in recent memory. And we also had a great first week for A Court of Thorns and Roses, the other book that we chose out of Friends Pitching Fantasy. So I would say this set of Friends Pitching Fantasy books has been a rousing success.
It has been a very rousing success. So
some would say that A Court of Thorns and Roses was an arousing success.
I understood your intention when you said rousing. I didn't think we need to explicitly go there, but for all the listeners, we went.
A Court of Thorns and Roses explicitly went there, Charles.
It did, and we'll probably be picking up the rest of that series too. But we were, once I started the Farseer Trilogy, I didn't want to stop. So when Dylan was like, "Hey, we've read both first books. What do you want to read next?" I'm like, "Royal Assassin. Let's keep it going." So, Dylan, let's just jump into the conversation. Let's get one of those spoiler warnings going so we can get into it.
Yeah, we're about to have a no-holds-barred conversation about Royal Assassin, Book 2 of the Farseer Trilogy. So if you haven't yet read Book 2 here, and or you haven't yet read Book 1, Assassin's Apprentice, now's a great time to get on that and to also turn this down in your headphones before we get into the spoilers, because that's going to start happening now.
That is going to start happening right away, guys. So, here we are.
Forgot to say, We will not spoil book 3 or any other Realm of the Elderlings books, partially because I've not read book 3.
Yep. And I have read it, and I'm actively reading it right now for our future episode, but I'm not going to say nothing about it. I'm going to stick strictly to Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin today. And there's plenty to talk about within Royal Assassin. So I think the first thing that I just need to know, Dylan, you said you were enjoying the read earlier in the episode, but I got to get your full take on your first impression with Royal Assassin. Where are we with Robin Hobb's trilogy? How is it holding up? What's the experience been like for you?
Well, it remains shockingly modern for a book that this one came out in 1996. And you kind of forget that when you're reading it, and you can forget how long ago 1996 was. I mean, that 27 years ago at this point. So that's
I don't want to do the math.
And that's a long time in the world of fantasy writing, and it's a testament to how good it is that I totally forget that, and I remember that, and I'm in awe of it, and then I forget it again because it's so easy to get just sucked into a story like it's written in such a modern way, which, we're far from the first ones to say that. I know you read a quote from international best-selling author Mark Lawrence, friend of the show, who basically said in a much more eloquent way how modern Robin Hobb writes. Character work remains brilliant, and I would say in the latter half of this book, the plot and the pacing picks up substantially. We have a lot more happening, and the court intrigue gets more interesting. Fitz is kind of, I guess, getting older and a little more directly involved in what's going on rather than just being a total pawn in the whole thing. He's maybe moved up to like a rook or something. I'm no chess master. Maybe rooks are awesome, but it's he's got a little bit more say in what's going on without being he's no queen, but
no
he's got a lot more involvement, I would say, and the intrigue and the things that are happening and the stakes of all of it feel a lot bigger in this book. And the book is also physically much bigger. It is worth mentioning. It's, Robin Hobb goes full out, like, length creep over the course of this series.
Yes.
And that's a pretty common phenomenon, I think, in fantasy trilogies where each one's progressively longer than the previous one. But I would say that this one is even more so, like the series creep from book 1 to book 2, and then even more so to book 3 is huge. But Hobb finds a way to keep, especially the second half of this book, really moving, and all the character work and foundation she's laid before we get there. It really pays off, because it's amazing how much I found myself caring about these characters. I mean, like Verity, right at the start of book 1, like feels almost like a nothing burger. Then when we're getting news like, oh, maybe he's dead, maybe he's not, whatever, I'm like, he better not be dead. Like, he's one of the few, like, just very unquestionably good people in this story, and he's always on Fitz's side. So moments like that, I'm like, oh wow, it's amazing how much Hobb has made me care about characters that, like, could have easily been very two-dimensional based on how we were first introduced to them, but just they're onions with layers, like ogres or what.
What about a parfait? Everybody likes parfait. No, I totally agree. I think this book continues to build upon the skills that Robin Hobb was demonstrating in Assassin's Apprentice. The character work and the writing style, it's incredible. And yes, it it's longer than the first book, and I've seen the familiar criticisms of the pacing issues and things like that. But you can't argue with the fact that, hey, this book was written in 1996, okay, and it is so far ahead of its time. We haven't gotten anything like it up until something like the Kingkiller Chronicles nearly 20 years later, so it's pretty incredible to see this kind of thoughtful approach to writing this tragic, unpopular kind of narrative of a main character taking shape for as long of a page count as we've had, pretty much 100% in the mind of Fitz, which is crazy. This is the most we've been reading into a single character by the end of a second book in a long, long time. Especially now, it's so popular to jump around perspectives and tell the story. In this book, it's going to be from these characters' perspectives. It's like, no, it's all Fitz all the time, baby. And I'm here for it, because the things that happen by the end of this book, it could only be possible with the investment of everything that's come before it, with how much we are in Fitz's mind and how much we have nurtured Fitz's relationships through the narrative. It's an incredible payoff that you don't really get a whole lot in a reading experience, because a lot of authors aren't investing that kind of commitment to the intimacy of knowing a character like Robin Hobb is willing to do in this trilogy.
For sure. We've read series where, like, character deaths, let's say, are things that they just kind of happen, and you can tell the author is like wanting to hit you in the feels with it, but just doesn't feel earned, or you'll almost be reading, you're like, the stakes here aren't doing it for me because I don't really care if this character dies or anything like that. And they can have these intense action-packed scenes that theoretically anyone can die, they're in danger, blah, blah. But without the stakes and the worries that's about that character, they end up falling flat, or reading is kind of like boring. What Robin Hobb is able to do in making like court intrigue, or a character like slowly dying from disease, or maybe poisoning, or maybe something else,
bit of a combination of both.
Watching that unfold, like some degree of everything, but I guess mostly it was the skill, right? But you don't know that as you're reading, and it's like, what's happening? This guy's kind of like shriveling and going slowly toward the light, but he's hanging on. During those moments, it's like, oh wow, that she's made that have a ton of drama and tension and have us extremely invested. And also when we know, like what happens when, like, Shrewd is who I'm talking about, King Shrewd, when he dies, we know, with Verity gone, Regal is in prime shape to take the throne and do all his messed up Regal things that we hate. And it's like, I don't know, you just feel like Fitz so well, and he feels like a friend, and the things that happen to him, like, when I'm reading it, I take them so personally because we're so tight to his point of view, and he's a pretty sympathetic character and a well-meaning one. And then the things that happen to all the other characters by relation to Fitz, it's just, that means a lot too, and of course we've come to care about those characters individually for their own sake outside of just their relationship to Fitz. So the character work is more and more leading to like intense investment, and it's all of that work that she's put in ahead of time that other folks might read as slow. It's paying off because now the same kind of events are happening that could happen in another book, but we care way more. We're way more invested in those things.
I agree completely, and it's all comes back to like the way she just balances everything too with these characters. And I'm talking about in the first book, to me, like a big theme was this idea of just societal constructs and how they treat you and how you function within your rung of society. In this book, I very much got that we were talking about. One is kind of like everyone's sense of duty. That was a really interesting thing to go around our cast of characters and see how they handled this theme of duty, and where you've got Fitz is battling with it. Obviously, Molly's being like, "What good is it?"
Yeah.
Regal is totally like, "Forget it," and Verity and Shrewd are so focused on it that they've lost everything to Regal, so it's a really interesting balance to see. And then I love how we're balancing the relationship and the bond that Fitz has, because he's getting older, he's starting to develop his own relationships, and now he's got two, one with Night Eyes and one with Molly. And it's interesting to see the similarities and the distinctions and like how he treats them very differently, but it all comes down to this same thing of like, how can you like have people you love in your life when you have a job to do, and how can you like, is letting people into your life nothing but exposing you to pain and something that should be shunned or suppressed or siloed, or is it the main goal in life? How do you like, what is it? And Fitz spends the whole time stumbling around trying to figure it out, and he never quite gets his footing on any of it. And that's like the funny thing about, well, funny, it's like a really interesting, beautiful piece about this book is that even by the end of the book, the theme doesn't quite, what happens is basically he dies, right? Like he gets and it becomes isolated and alone. And that's a really interesting, I don't know, it's just a really interesting exploration for this character. He never quite solves it. There's not quite this hero's moment where he's like, "I love you, Molly, we're going to be together forever." It's suffering and torture the whole book, pretty much.
Right. The duty thing that you're touching on is definitely the theme, I would say. Mm-hmm. I think that it's interesting the way that you compare and contrast the relationships. I mean, Night Eyes like totally doesn't understand these human constructs and is a lot more like bestial, and in that way can kind of be the and bestial, maybe that's not the right word. He's more just like at the very base, like it's important to like care about your pack, it's important to eat, it's important to like survive. Yeah. And in a lot of ways it's pretty clear that Night Eyes and Fitz, when he's like in wolf mode, like doesn't suffer the way that people can suffer, because people hold on to all of these abstract ideas like duty. And I think that it's interesting. You've got him connected to Night Eyes through the wit, through the wit. You've got him connected to Verity through the skill, and then you've got what he would at least claim is the strongest bond, which is to Molly through just good old fashioned love, and hormones. And I would say probably a lot of those flying around.
A few, I would say.
And not quite at the level of A Court of Thorns and Roses, but we get some.
No, we get a lot of the details skipped, but it happens a lot. Yeah, and what's funny is, Fitz is at a different stage of life. In the first book, he was very much the victim of circumstance. What I love about this book is people start to point out to him, Fitz, you have choices now. And it becomes most apparent when he's faced with Molly. And it's like, you have the choice to court her or not. Like, this is something that you're actively doing. And it's like, oh, you have the choice to like make yourself known in court or not. He's starting to make decisions and buy into this world. And it's not just like he's using it not only as something he has to do, he starts to use it as an excuse, which is pretty crazy. He's like, oh, I have to, for the love of my king, my duty to my king. It's like, you don't even talk about King Shrewd anymore, who you made this promise to. And now you're talking all about Verity, and Verity doesn't even want you to do this. So it's like, what are you talking about, Fitz? It's a really interesting, subtle way that this character, like, we bought into this whole thing of, like, oh, he's my king, he's my king, he's my king. Now Fitz is presented with options, and he's older, and he's starting to make sometimes selfish options. And it's interesting to watch that sense of duty kind of twist and morph throughout this whole book. We talked about Night Eyes being the total antithesis of that. And one of the things that I really love about that, because we're told, hey, bonding to the wit is bad, and you're no better than an animal. We knew that in book 1, right? Birch was very adamant about that. And now here we are in book 2. It starts with, Fitz sensing Night Eyes in a cage, the agony of him being in a cage. And the compulsion of feeling that sense of agony brought him to save him from the cage and take care of him, and then he just was like unwittingly bonded. He keeps having this kind of there you go. He's like but it almost is like you start to see Fitz is putting up these excuses for himself, and people are starting to call him out on it as he gets older. But what I like about now that we have Night Eyes as a character is it's the direct contrast to what he has to do to maintain his relationship with Verity and Shrewd. And we talked about the duty aspect of that, and you mentioned Night Eyes doesn't really have that construct. And there's actually a pretty good quote in here from Night Eyes early on in the book when they're talking about like freedom, and he's like, Fitz, I think, is one of these things where he's like trying to tell him to be on his own and leave him out of his life. You don't want me bonded to you. Like, you're better off alone. And he goes, let's see. He says, men it is who think they can rule others' lives, but have no bonds to them. Do you think that to bond or not to bond is for you alone to decide? My heart is my own, I give it where I will not give it to one who thrusts me aside, nor will I obey one who denies pack and bond. And that, if Fitz only could listen to some of that, because he's in that exact same situation where he's got people in his life who genuinely, like, love him and care about him that he's denying, and then there's that people who thrust him aside or deny pack and bond, like you're a bastard. That definition is literally to deny pack and bond, to call you that. It's that interesting duality that he has about him, and the result is there's not really a good answer presented by the end, but at least it's like the decision you have to make has to be your own at a certain point, and it's cowardly to use one as an excuse for the other, which is what Fitz does for like hundreds and hundreds of pages in this book, and pretty much ruins every relationship in his life, switching from one to the other. So it was just really masterfully crafted. It's so much fun to try and wrap my head around it in this book.
Yeah, it's messy, which reflects reality. These things aren't usually easily wrapped up in a bow by the end of some sort of like event in your life. There aren't clear objective answers. You do get sort of like the angel and the devil, though who's the angel and who's the devil? You do have sort of Night Eyes on one shoulder and Verity on the other, and Verity, not even necessarily himself speaking these things into what Fitz has to do, although sometimes that's the case. It's like the idea of Verity and what it means to serve Verity and serve the king and serve the crown, and it's like, a lot of times it is cop-out. It's ways to like not take risks and keep doing whatever is easiest for you in the moment. And I think the way that it works out with Molly, Fitz thinks he's being as unselfish as possible, but there's even a moment where Patience is telling him like, oh yeah, like there's this like herb that can be used to prevent pregnancies. You know what I mean? And I saw Molly picking it. Wonder what's going on over there. Like, guess she's trying to use it for one of the other effects, right, Fitz? Yeah. And Fitz is like, oh, wow, like, I didn't even consider the amount of burden that I'm putting on Molly. Like, I was like, that'll all just sort itself out.
Yeah, and there's that like, great where Patience brings up a lot of great points. She's like, what are you going to achieve by pursuing Molly? You know that any path leads to destruction for her. Like, you might be fine in most of them, heartbroken maybe, but fine, but she would not survive. And good call from Patience to have that foresight. But it's another thing that Fitz doesn't realize. More often than not, I was being so reminded of A Name of the Wind and Wise Man's Fear throughout this. Not to give any spoilers
I was
to that,
too, yeah.
but there is a main character, and he's so self-absorbed in his relationships and his tasks and his quests and his schooling and whatever, that people have to call him out all the time, and he's learning. And because we're in that perspective so much, we're almost like learning with him. We're like, oh yeah, I guess Molly is doing other stuff when she's not on screen with Fitz, and like there is a lot that she's willing to do because Molly has to remind Fitz many times, like, hey, you're not the only one risking something. I'm willingly risking this, like, the same amount for my own life. I'm choosing this as much as you are. You don't get to choose it and then be like, oh, but don't worry, I'm doing this for you. It's like, no, you fool, I'm choosing this too. Like, why are you acting like you're trying to save me or something? It's a really interesting dynamic, and so reminiscent of Patrick Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicles, that I was like, wow, this is a fun subgenre that we don't get enough of.
Yeah, and I really don't know what else to quite put in that subgenre.
It's very niche.
It does feel like the Fitz-Molly relationship is a very clear predecessor to the Quoth-Denna relationship, and that plays out so far significantly differently in terms of the events and all the details, right. But the sentiment of a character who will say all the words that indicate that he prioritizes this person above everyone else. He'll keep telling himself, he'll keep telling you, the reader, whatever else, that, my love interest is the most important person to me. But then all his behaviors indicate that's not the case. And end of the day, Molly is calling Fitz out for no, if I was actually your number one priority, you do this, you do that. Instead, you keep talking about Verity and how you can't do any of this. And it's you do have choices, but Fitz doesn't see it that way. And he does make certain attempts. He does ask King Shrewd if he can marry Molly, but
Shrewd's
when
LOL,
King
no.
Shrewd says no, which is of course he's going to say no. It's funny how naive Fitz still is at certain points.
Oh yeah.
Shrewd, he's shrewd. He does not care about sentimentality.
I've already got you lined up for a very strategic marriage. You're going to be sitting pretty. You're going to be a noble, and you're going to have lands and holdings, and, it's a good family. The dad likes you. It's I got you everything. Political connections and, attraction. It's good. And he's oh, God, I'd rather have Molly. And he's still, even when he gets rejected, they still continue to court, and they still, Molly's knowingly doing this too, but Fitz is, we're in the mind of Fitz, and he's so, agonized over it, and it comes to, a head, really. It gets to the point where literally everyone knows. It's the worst kept secret ever. Yeah. And then I've got another great quote for Fitz and Molly here, if I could find it. But while I'm looking for it, we all know how you feel about the Quoth and Denna relationship, or longtime listeners will know. Obviously, very different relationship, a precursor maybe, but very different. How are we sitting on the Fitz-Molly relationship? Are we shipping it, as we say, or nay?
I mean, I'm shipping it just because they both love each other, and when two people, two adults love each other and would like to be together ideally, I would also like them to be together if possible. But I don't know, it just doesn't, there's some piece for me that is missing in terms of tugging at my heartstrings at quite the same level that I get for Quoth and Denna. And I can't exactly tell you why that is. I think it's like my best attempt is the actual interactions between Fitz and Molly. They're kind of, I don't know, they fall a little bit flat compared to Fitz's other relationships, I would
For
say.
sure.
Like the complexity just isn't quite there in their interactions.
Right.
It's just kind of like on the surface for the most part. Not
I'd
entirely,
say
but
there's
just if you
definitely
compare
some
it to,
telling of Fitz and Molly love each other. And
yeah.
so we can get to the point of them being together and then talking about how hard it is to be together. We missed the romance part. We missed the will they, won't they. We didn't get the scenes of them casually doing stuff. We got it when they were kids.
There's
but
not a lot like, yeah, they're like flirting and they're like, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the Name of the Wind and
No.
the Wise Man's Fear and stuff, but I would just say for Quoth and Denna, we get a little bit more of the like process that is playing out. Like you get their actual conversations and you see see how they're developing whatever you would call their relationship, because that's a complicated one, but they're developing whatever feelings they hold toward each other, and you get it, you see why. And then like you're saying, Charles, with Molly and Fitz, like the same elements are there, but you just don't see the process. You kind of see a lot more just outcome. Like this is where we're at, and then we had sex, and then we shouldn't have because I can't marry her. And then she said I was her wife, or what? She was my wife. I was there.
I'm your wife now.
It's kind of like like those things are happening, but there's not a lot of like relationship for this like sake of relationship going on.
Right.
And I
think of all of his relationships, even like his one with Lady Patience. I think Molly's was the least nurtured because it also had to do the heavy lifting of the drama of Fitz trying to maintain the relationship, not even just be in one. So I think there was less focus on it, less development on it, which it's a common criticism I've seen. Even our friend Patrick says, hell yes for Fitz's bond with Night Eyes and hell no for Fitz's relationship with Molly. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say hell no.
Patrick Leo,
but
booktuber extraordinaire.
Booktuber extraordinaire.
And Goodreads reviewer extraordinaire for
Prolific
sure.
Goodreads reviewer for sure.
These like really well thought out reviews for like every book. So props to Patrick for that. And I see where he's coming from. I don't know if I'm hell no for Fitz and Molly's relationship, but it just doesn't quite elicit much feeling for me. And I'm a sucker for a good like relationship with longing and complication and stuff like that, but there's something that's like 2D about it in the way that
exactly.
A Rothfuss writes the same kind of relationship in a more three-dimensional way.
Right. And in Rothfuss, that relationship is so much more the focus of the story than this relationship is not really as focused. It's important, but it's only one minor part. But tell me if this doesn't tug on your heartstrings. I found the quote I wanted to read. Ooh. This is when Fitz first realizes that Molly has left Buckkeep. Gone. Molly was gone. She wasn't coming back. I had held myself together by refusing to think of her. This empty room jerked the blindfold from my eyes. I looked into myself and despised what I saw. I wish I could call back the kiss I had placed on Celerity's fingertips, balm for a girl's wounded pride, or the lure to bind her and her father to me. I no longer knew which it had been. Neither could be justified. Both were wrong, if I believed at all in the love I had pledged to Molly. That one act was proof I was guilty of all she had charged me with. I would always put the Farseers ahead of her. I had dangled marriage before Molly like bait, left her with no pride in herself, nor belief in me. And there's also a line where he's like, I had promised to Verity that I would never drain someone's energy, but that's exactly what I had done to Molly. It's like these revelations are... So one, Hobb, like, come on, powerhouse writer, right? Like that was incredible. And two, it's really this hypocrite theme that's going on with Fitz. He used his sense of duty to kind of let his relationship with Molly fizzle out to the point where she just like straight up got tired of waiting and left, and he's like gutted completely. It's a touching moment. It's really powerful.
She claims that she's leaving because of someone else who I believe she uses he pronouns for, that she's leaving because she cares about him as much as Fitz cares about the Farseers and duty and blah, 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 blah. And Fitz has it in his head that, oh, it must be like a new guy in her life, blah, blah, blah. But that is never clarified, and my guess goes toward she did get pregnant because the herb she's using, patient said, isn't very good. All it does is really get you sick, and when you're sick, maybe you have a slightly less chance of getting pregnant, so that's how it is sometimes effective. So I'm going to guess that Molly is pregnant, and that's what's playing out over there.
Maybe it's addressed again. I can't say. We'll have to find out.
We'll have to raffo.
We'll have to raffo. Here's the other quote. I knew myself for a coward and worse than a thief. I had once told Verity I could not draw off another man's strength to feed my own, that I would not. Yet every day that was what I did to Molly. Oh,
beautiful.
Beautiful.
And that's the thing, is Hobb's prose and her way of describing these things is just chef's kiss. I think that any places in which I'm like, okay, well, these actual scenes of them interacting, even if that's not quite doing it for me, the way that she's able to like evoke the right emotions and get you in the right headspace with this like poetic, beautiful language like that, I guess that's probably why I'm not like hell no to Molly and Fitz, is because Hobb comes in for the save with these like, Fitz reflecting on, oh, this is what's actually happening. This is how I'm actually treating her, and I get why she's reacting in this way. And it kind of allows you to fill in some gaps where if Hobb didn't have such beautiful, evocative, and I guess insightful ways of describing things, then yeah, maybe she wouldn't get away with the Fitz-Molly relationship as well as I think she does.
That's well said, and that kind of leads us to should we just go? Did we talk enough about Night Eyes? I think we did.
Night Eyes got some pop.
Night Eyes got some pop, and I'll have more to say about him in a bit, but I don't know. I wanted to talk more about like kind of the end of this book, because I feel like it just contextualizes so much of where we're going with it, because there's that revelation that King Shrewd was being leached, but then, we get to the, like, Fitz is captured. I love when his strategy was he was going to just do a lot of drugs and run up to the people using the skill and kill them. And then it's him running down the Great Hall in front of everyone with a knife, like screaming, chasing someone, and then tackling them and stabbing them over and over. It's like, that must have been an insane visual for anyone else. But for Fitz, it seemed like such a rational choice. Like, I must defend my king. And then it's like he ruined any chance he had of ever holding influence with anyone in that room ever again.
He went from having a shot to basically be the, like, sitting temporary king and having a ridiculous amount of power where all these people are behind him, to just, like, absolute maniac who is murdering people in front of everyone. Yeah. Gotta feel bad for Shade, who trained him in the arts of, like, being a secret assassin, and then Fitz just like running up and just like stabby. Yeah, that's his new method. But yeah, I don't know, he just lost it. I don't know what to say.
Absolutely lost it.
Rough one.
And I think we can talk about King Shrewd then, because here's a character who throughout this whole book, his health is failing. He denied Fitz's marriage, right? And he orchestrated the other marriage. But there's this interesting sense of duty amongst the Farseer royalty, right? They have a PR problem because they're being seen as aloof and not doing anything. Meanwhile, we know that through the skill, they're able to divert people in every which way. They're sabotaging red ships and all of that. But it's a thankless job, and it's leeching their strength. And you see Verity rapidly aging, and Shrewd is sequestered to his rooms. It's interesting how like this total devotion to protecting the realm is actually their weakness that someone like Regal was able to manipulate, and in front of everybody, and we all knew it was coming. Shrewd and Verity also knew it was coming. That's one of the best things about Regal as a villain. Like, there's nothing, he's like, yeah, I want to be king, and I'm actively poisoning Shrewd, and I don't care that Verity's gone. And then everyone is like, yeah, just let him do it. That's Regal, you know. It is what it is. And then it just happens. It's absolutely insane.
I listened to this football podcast around the NFL, and host Dan Hansis, he says, like, whenever there's a guy that people will just be like, oh yeah, like Will's Will, like so, you know, like Bob's Bob. Like whenever someone's described that way, it's like they're just a horrible person. Like they're just an awful human being. So he's like, yeah, that's kind of what you remind me of. Where it's like, yeah, you know, Regal's Regal. Like Regal's
Regal's
Regal.
being Regal. It's incredible.
Yeah.
What I love about this whole thing is like we all know he's bad, but we do nothing about it, and then the bad thing happens, and we acted like we were, by inaction, we were doing our duty and being good the whole time, and yet we end up paying these consequences for it. I feel like with King Shrewd at the end, there was a lot of interesting stuff there where he starts to kind of backpedal the beliefs he was holding for 2 straight books, both about Regal and about Fitz. And I don't know, Dylan, what do you think about this whole like letting Regal run amok to the point of your own death? Do you think like I feel like there were some moments where King Shrewd in those final hours, but Hobb was kind of pretty deliberately vague about it. I don't know. How'd you read into those moments?
Well, there is a moment at the very end of his life where he just says, like, I was foolish. Like, I let Regal be Regal too long. And,
Right.
like, I don't have the quote like you do there, Charles, maybe. But he is like, I really let this, like, I really screwed this up in the end. And I let Regal go too far and be too Regal about everything. So he gets this kind of weird moment of clarity where he's been like all kind of on not himself and not in his right mind. It just comes to, and he's like, I screwed everything up, Fitz. My B, like I also screwed things up with you. And I would say that like I like it from a narrative standpoint because you just don't want to see Shrewd go off, you know, off into the sunset with no idea what just played out, because he's a character that's well established for like having everything figured out and all this plotting that's like, oh wow, he has such a blind spot for Regal. And everyone's always, that's another one of those things that in this book, almost like the Molly Fitz situation, where we're just told over and over again, like, oh, well, Regal is Shrewd's favorite. Where it's like, what about Regal would ever make him Shrewd's favorite?
Yeah.
It's like Verity is like busting his ass every day for your kingdom and like shriveling up and aging way beyond his years for you. And he's a guy who cares so much about that kind of stuff and his kingdom and his duty. And Regal is just a fop who Like anyone with any sense of like what people are like can see through him and see he's a terrible person.
Well, it's
And
kind
it's
of
like, I don't
interesting
know.
because we're
It's
so
weird that
committed
Shrood has that
to.
blind spot.
I agree. But the only argument I would have for Hobbes's defense is that this story is 100% through Fitz's perspective. Fitz would never know the relationship of Shrewd and Regal because they're not family, and we only get what we're told. One of the things I like about Regal as this villain is everyone else besides Fitz likes Regal. Like Birch and Fitz don't like him. The Fool doesn't like him, but everyone else, they like him. He's a charismatic guy. Even Ketrican liked him and was like, "Oh, he wanted to go riding with me. He was so nice and charming." It's like, do you not understand that he purposefully ran off and let you get trapped by Forged Ones, hoping that you would die? Like, this is crazy. Do you not see King Shrewd, that he's guarding he controls the guards and the people taking care of you, and he's keeping you high so you don't do anything, and he's giving you these headaches so you don't leave? But he uses that charm and that wit on everyone except Fitz, and so it's kind of interesting to see how when he's talking to like the kitchen staff and they're like, "Oh, Regal would be a better king than Verity. Verity left us to chase a fairy tale. Regal's here, like holding court with everyone, and he's so handsome, and he's he's putting on these great balls, and he's so well dressed, and all these other things." And you're like, what are we doing here? And I guess Shrewd maybe was kind of blinded by some of that. I think, this book has kind of danced around the duty to the realm and the duty to the people in your life, and that may have just been Shrewd's blind side. He was so adamant on running the kingdom that he could never consider that someone within his own ranks would be working against him, no matter how obvious the signs. And you're right, Dylan, we did get a moment with Shrewd where he acknowledged it, and I think I found the quote in my book here where Shrewd is going, he's talking to Fitz. "I would say farewell to Verity. I would have him know from me that I did not countenance any of this. Let me at least keep that much faith with the son who kept faith with me." That's literally all he said about it. So with the son who kept faith with me says it all. And such a shrewd way of saying that too. He's still not acknowledging or won't vocalize, Regal tried to kill me, or Regal killed me so he could take the throne. He said, "Let me be faithful to the son, faithful to me." It's such like a fatherly kind of withholding of emotion kind of vibe too. It says a lot.
And the implication being that the other son did not keep faith with him.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's kept subtle, and that's pretty cool that Shrewd goes out the way that he lived.
But then he does one when he skill links with Fitz. There's this one part that I like where he calls Fitz son of my son, blood of my blood. In my own way, I have loved you. And he's like, "My young assassin, what have I made of you? How have I twisted my own flesh? You do not know how young you still are, chivalry's son. It is not too late to grow straight again. Lift up your head, see beyond all this." And that was pretty much the last words he said before he died. And it says like a bubble popping. Then he was gone, period, new paragraph. Like a bubble popping, period, new paragraph. So you're like, oh, geez. Wow. It was pretty wild stuff.
Some good writing. And yeah, it's super confusing from the guy who is the reason, let's say, why Fitz can't marry Molly.
And why he's in the situation in the first place. It's King Shrewd's idea to pick him up off of the floor and make him a tool. It was his idea.
For sure. And he's kind of apologizing for that aspect of it, but he's also telling him, like, hey, like, now you should do whatever you want. Like, now you shouldn't just be restricted by the things
he's
that
saying,
I did to
like,
you.
I see my mistakes. You really are my blood. You really are someone worthy of having your own life. You can move on from it. And he's also saying, like, this stuff that we've, again, this duty that we've ruined our lives for, it's not worth it. Like, you can still walk away from all this, right? Is what he's saying. It's like, this is something worth walking away from. I think as he's on his deathbed and realizing that his own son betrayed him, that it wasn't worth it at all, and that he wished he probably had more time to keep his family together and less time being so shrewd and scheming, if you will. Shrewd being shrewd.
Yeah, shrewd.
Yeah.
The thing is that I would say it goes back to what we're talking about around Night Eyes and the discrepancy between how Night Eye sees the world and how someone like Shrewd might see the world is, for Night Eyes, it's as simple as pack. And pack isn't like this abstract concept that's bigger than everyone and blah, blah. It's literally the other wolves, or in Fitz's case, people or living beings that you are united with. And that's who you owe this loyalty and all these things, like to make their lives better and to be, greater than the sum of your parts and together and supportive and all that kind of stuff. That would be that would be if Shrewd was like Farseer, not duty as an abstract concept, just like the Farseer clan.
Right.
We do what we can to all make each other's lives better, and the other stuff doesn't matter as much.
Right.
And he's kind of coming around at the end of his life to seeing it that way, where it's like, oh, wow, all this BS about like, oh, well, he's a bastard and this is the royal line succession and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, wait, you're straight up the son of my son.
Yeah.
Like, like you are part of the Farseer clan in the most clear way. And it's kind of, it comes around toward the end to more of the Night Eyes way of seeing things. And I think that's kind of an aspect of Hobb's writing. She never like beat this drum super hard or over and over, but I think she kind of gets at the idea that in a lot of ways, like, animals are more like noble than people in there, and that's kind of an Ursula K. Le Guin thing too. In Wizard of Earthsea, is this like there's something so like honest and true and one with the world about like especially simple animals, and it's only people that like overcomplicate things and in that way like can grow to be wicked or even unintentionally like do all these bad things. So
well said. And I think you're really dialing in on Robin Hobb's thesis in this story, at least in this book. It's hard to imagine that she has a thesis because she's so subtle about it and she's not offering any kind of a solution. But in those moments with King Shrewd, I think is very telling. And then this idea of duty, I think, is very telling. But then there's this scene and towards the end, right, where he dies. And there's this chapter called Wolf Days that I think summarizes this whole thing, where it's written in the italics like it is in the beginning of all the books. But the exercise for centering oneself is a simple one. Stop thinking of what you intend to do. Stop thinking of what you have just done. Then stop thinking that you have stopped thinking of those things. Then you will find the now, capital N, the time that stretches eternal and is really the only time there is. Then in that place, you will finally have time to be yourself. And when I read that, I was like, highlight, because the time to be yourself is all Fitz has ever quested after. And he's looked for it in duty, and he's looked for it in relationships, and he's looked for it in the wit bond. And I think it's like, look, when you strip all of those things away and you really try and figure out, when all the cards are on the table, like with King Shrewd, and you're really looking back, like, and you're faced with the now. And Fitz is literally actively dying in this scene, right? So you're like, okay, this is literally what he's reflecting on and being left with. It's this idea that in that place you will have time to be yourself when you're free from all of the things you have to do and have done and just did. It's like, no, there's this other thing about life. And it, you were right where Ursula Le Guin used nature to say this same thing of like, there is just existing, and you can be yourself in that, and it's free from judgment and society and duty and all these other things, these social constructs that Fitz was a victim of in book 1, and then duty that he's a victim of in book 2, that you can have this higher plane of existence, right? And using the natural world to pull on that, to finally have time to be yourself, which I found so specific from Hobb to say that, because Fitz has had such an identity crisis, and even now he's got someone his whole life telling him to sacrifice his being to be a tool, and I'll keep you fed, and it's like, yeah, okay, and now he's being like, oh, JK, that was a bad idea, don't do that anymore, and he's just so confused. And it's like, hey, find the time to be yourself. It's really I think the message and the thesis that Hobb is trying to hit home with Fitz, that he did not really learn yet, but maybe through actively dying and finding that serenity, he might take some of it. Who knows?
Yeah, that's well said, Charles. There's this awesome passage in this book for, I'm in psychology for any of the listeners who don't know, and there are these books on acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and there's one passage in one of the books that talks about how like animals can feel pain, but only humans can suffer, and it's talking about the idea, like ACT is based on all this thing called relational frame theory, which is all about how like language allows us to contextualize things, but also like draw associations between things. And it feels kind of pertinent to all this discussion where it's like, we as humans are capable of assigning like going against your duty is bad. Like, and duty means all of these good things. So if you don't do it, it's bad and you're bad and all this kind of stuff. And you can really like Fitz does, agonize in ways that you just can't when you're in wolf mode. And sure, if you step in a trap or whatever, can you hurt your wolf leg? right your wolf leg. Yeah, could you hurt yourself? Yeah, but you can't psychologically suffer when you're in that mode, and you just have this like undercurrent of acceptance of like life, and here are the things I'm supposed to be doing, and you don't question it in the way that like Fitz is always, like we've said, agonizing over all of these things. Like Fitz suffers in a way that he can't when he's a wolf, and he kind of laments that when he's reflecting on it. Like all his best moments in his life are basically just when he's
wolf stuff,
when he's in wolf mode.
Right. And there's another interesting passage in Wolf Days that I think kind of summarizes this, where he is bonded with, died and gone to Night Eyes, right? For wolves, as for dogs, life is a briefer thing than for men, if you measure it by counting days and how many turns of a season one sees. But in 2 years, a cub wolf does all a man does in a score. He comes to the full of his strength and size. He learns all that is needful for him to be a hunter or a mate or a leader. The candle of his life burns brighter and briefer than a man's. In a decade of years, he does all that a man does in 5 or 6 times that many. A year passes for a wolf as a decade does for a man. Time is no miser when one lives always in the now. So I feel like this whole chapter where Fitz is died and gone to be a wolf with Night Eyes, there's a lot of this kind of thesis going for Fitz, whether it's all what Hobbes is saying, to accept all of it and live in the now and free yourself from the burdens of society. I don't think so. I think there's going to be a consequence to a statement like that. But it's something that Fitz has never been allowed to do. It's something Schrute asked him to do, like be your own man, stand up straight, or walk away from all of this. Like, that's what I want for you. And he literally does. He manages to escape through just as a wolf, but to what is that an escape, and to what is that actually living life? It's hard to say. Hobb gives no answers because Fitz is always making mistakes and fumbling through, and it's always complicated, and there's never a clear solution. But it's a really interesting, thought-provoking idea. Is he escaping as the wolf, or is he truly experiencing life free from the burdens of this bureaucracy baloney that never treated him right in the first place? Hard to know. And then when he comes back to life at the end, you don't know what to feel. You're like, is this good or is this bad? I don't know. Was he better off just running around as a wolf all the time? Or is he better off getting a second chance at life now? Who knows? Who's to say?
Well, we'll have to see how that all plays out in book 3, but it does remind me of Fight Club, actually, where there's that famous quote from someone who you might not want to take life advice from in Tyler Durden, but he can be pretty much like Regal in some ways, pretty charismatic and easy to fall for, even though he does some terrible things. But he says, it's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything. And I think that we finally get this moment where Fitz, who's been falling back on all of his things he is supposed to do because of duty, because of all these outside forces that are telling him exactly what he needs to do, or he has no choice, and blah blah blah. It's like, all right, now that's all gone. He is considered dead to the world, besides a couple people who know that he's alive. And now Fitz, someone that you lovingly called fantasies most
Human
lovable doormat,
yeah,
something like that. Yeah, you have him in a moment where it's like, all right, now he doesn't really have so many people to step on him, and he doesn't have these overbearing forces to weigh down on him. He's gonna have to figure out what to do, and I'm interested to see where that goes, because the possibilities are endless, because now that he's lost everything, he's lost Molly, he's lost his position in court,
everyone thinks he's dead.
Everyone thinks he's dead. He is free to do anything. But knowing Fitz, he might not choose the wisest options. But neither did Tyler Durden. So
I don't know. I'm reading the omnibus on my Kindle of all 3 books in the trilogy, and finishing book 2, you're only 57% of the way through, which means book 3 is almost as long as the other 2 combined. Pretty close. So
yeah.
There's a lot of decisions to be made, I guess, with Fitz after this. But it does set an interesting premise. And, I guess you can kind of talk about Burrich a little bit, because Burrich is the one that conceives the idea and brings him back and all of this. And, his sense of duty is an interesting one to look at here, too, because you learn that he was the first one to love Lady Patience. And then that didn't work out. And then he went on to be chivalry's right-hand man and a father figure to Fitz. And you get to see some of those touching moments too. And he's an interesting character. He's one who has committed his whole life to service of others. And he's taken everything as a service. And in the end, it's kind of left him alone. You have to figure out, is this his life a life well lived? I mean, who knows? His one charge, he lost the stables. That was something that happened, right? That was depressing. And it's you worked your whole life devoted to breeding the best horses, raising the best animals for the king. And then Regal just sells it all away in no time. It is heartbreaking, and you feel for him, but it's again that sense of sometimes those things are going to go away, and what do you have left? For Birch, there's not much.
Right. And it's interesting to contrast Burrich's situation with Patience with how Fitz treated his situation with Molly. Like Burrich, it seemed like it was a much cleaner cut. Like he's a pretty straightforward guy, at least unless more things are going to be revealed in the future about how that all played out. Kind of seems like he was like, well, this can't work. That sucks.
Yeah.
And then Chivalry went on to marry Patience.
And then, like, he doesn't really talk to her ever. They don't have a relationship now that she's single and ready to mingle, and so is he. And he's just like, I'm not even, no.
Is Birch ready to mingle? Let's be real. He's certainly single, but is he ready to mingle? That's
probably not.
He can basically mingle with farm animals, and that's about the limit. And dogs. But he's not implying anything about Birch's relationship.
I was going to say,
to these
not
animals.
A great choice of phrasing. Not a great phrasing.
Well,
there.
mingling doesn't mean...
I know. But in the context of single and ready to mingle, it does mean something, which is what we were talking about. So, in my mind, I was thinking like phrasing.
Well, not implying any of that stuff
of course.
Although
Birch
we don't
is
know.
A straight up man. But it's funny, like when Fitz is using the wit, and Birch is like, "I'd rather you have your hand in your pants in front of me than using the wit." You're like, "Oh, he really doesn't like the wit."
Yeah. Well, he ends up compromising on that in the end, where he cares more about Fitz than he does about whatever principles he has around the wit, and he puts on that big show and spits on Fitz.
Yeah, spits on Fitz.
I don't know what's so funny about the fact that it sounds like something you would like do at a carnival, I don't know. It's like
spits on Fitz, putting on the Ritz.
Right. I don't know. I'm just thinking of when people throw the ball at those things and dunks.
It's like a carnival game, yeah. Come on, spits on Fitz.
But anyway, yeah, he spits on Fitz, and then he puts on that big show just to indicate to Fitz, hey, you got to use the wit and pretend to be dead, and we'll settle the rest. And it's even just Fitz's understanding that Birch cares about him that much that allows Fitz to be like, wait, he wouldn't have done that. Like, he knows him too well. He knows deep down that Birch has a heart of gold. And Birch lives up to what we would say is more Night Eyes-like. And not just in the sense that he basically concocts a plan with Night Eyes, but also in the sense that he prioritizes the literal people in his life rather than his lofty principles about the wit is bad and blah 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 blah. So props to Birch, and he's a good character. He's a really well written character.
He is. I love when his moments of sentimentality come through, because when you think about it, this is the closest thing Fitz has to a father. Even though everything in this book would, like all the circumstantial societal stuff around it would say otherwise, that's really what they are. And there's no denying that bond that they have. So it's always so great when they have those moments of vulnerability with each other. Like, oh, the payoff is so sweet. When it happened in the first book, where we got to see those first glimpses, and then now where you see Birch really like compromising his long-held beliefs and to help Fitz, it's because in this book the chips really were down and people had to really evaluate what was important to them, and Birch chooses Fitz every time. It's a really nice thing to see, and I agree. And his character just really shines in these books. He gets so many great moments for whatever it is. I love their relationship.
Me too. I think basically the only character we haven't given any pop is the Fool. who it's interesting. We know he holds all these like weird answers to things, and he comes from like he gives us some details about his background in this book, and still it kind of raises more questions than it really provides answers, which is classic fool. He like the only thing that is pretty clear about the fool is that he really is loyal to Shrewd and cares a lot about Shrewd. And now Shrewd is dead.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see. He left with Kettrikin, who he also, I guess, didn't give a lot of pop, but seems like her plot is pretty straightforward of like she came into her own somewhat. And then
yeah. When you think about that sense of duty, right, where she's where she comes from, the mountain folk, they call their royalty sacrifice, and this whole idea that you exist to sacrifice your personal pleasures and well-being to serve the greater realm. And sometimes I feel like she's always having to realize that that's the case, and it's just as true in Buckkeep as it was in the mountains, even though they don't outwardly say it. And I think she's just learning to do that in a different way, like trying to hold court and gain influence instead of moping around waiting for your husband to come back. It's like you can take these moments and raise them up for yourself. But she doesn't, at the end of the day, she ends up escaping and disappearing, and that's that. So like you said, pretty straightforward for our good friend Kettrikin, but I do like that whole sacrifice kind of motif.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting and wraps in with some of the other stuff that we've talked about. But yeah, then there is the fool, and I guess it's hard to put a finger on how he fits into all of this. And I guess I'm kind of wary about putting you on the spot to describe it too much, just because how it ends. Like if we were both reading this for the first time, I would be like, Charles, where do you think the fool fits into all of this? But I don't know. I guess you kind of know where he fits into everything because you know how it ends. But I guess, is there any way to get into that kind of speculation discussion around, like, how's he fit in with the themes? How's he fit in? Like, he does just seem like he's this oddball that it's hard for me to place, like, oh, well, and the fool is also, like, the fool, what? He's loyal to Shrewd.
He is like the wild card.
How does that fit into everything?
He's very much a wild card. We get a little bit of his origin. We know he has these interesting origins coming from this unique tribe, and that he's out here trying to set the universe on the proper course. There's only a couple different options in which the world will flow correctly, and he's committed to seeing the path through. And you don't really know. You get the sense he's kind of sitting at a higher plane, but it's hard to say at this point. His relationship with King Shrewd I always found fascinating. He was so fiercely loyal, and he was hysterical when the king died. And you have to wonder, like, what's next for him after that, and how he could have allowed such a deep emotional connection if he's trying to set this greater course of the world. I think he's just going to be a bunch of contradictions. His character, and when you said it in the last episode, I found it so true when I was reading this book, of comparing him to the fool in the Kingkiller Chronicles.
Yeah, the wit.
King's wit. And not to be confused with the wit in the Farseer Trilogy that has the fool. This is the wit who is a fool. So, yeah, it's one of those kind of things for me. Not necessarily that he's like this supernatural being that jumps around like Samuel L. Jackson in the Avengers, just bringing people together. Not that vibe necessarily, but definitely like he's this chess piece
does
that's
not
sitting
give me
separate.
Samuel L. Jackson vibes either. For the record,
No.
if they made a movie, would be weird casting.
I'd ship it. I don't know. I think that'd be funny.
It would be interesting.
Although it's kind of, it's kind of interesting. Not really.
There's some ways in which, I don't know why, but yeah, it's interesting. He's like always telling Fitz about how he's destined for great things, but we also don't know the extent.
Or that
which...
not that he's destined for great things, but that his existence is putting all these great things, like all these possibilities could happen.
It uses the word catalyst, right?
Yeah, catalyst.
So it's more, and that's the same word that was used back in like the first chapter of Assassin's Apprentice, where Fitz, merely by being born, like screwed up the whole line.
I don't think he ever said you're gonna do great things, Fitz. I don't think anyone ever said that about Fitz. Like, I don't think he's destined for that. But
that's fair.
It's this idea that his existence causes so much like catalyst and turmoil and potential. Like, could he rise to power? Could he be used as a tool? Could he be killed? Could he, defame a whole side of a royal family? Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. It definitely shows up in the moment where he almost becomes like temporary king, and then he screws it all up by violently murdering, what was the guy's name, Justin or something like that?
Yeah, one of the coterie members.
Just violently murdering Justin in front of everyone.
Just the scene of Justin running, screaming, and then Fitz just being like, ah! The knife flailing around.
Oh,
that would be a great moment for film if we are ever so lucky as to get a Farseer video adaptation.
I can't imagine that's going to happen if it hasn't happened yet, but who knows with all of these fantasy adaptations that are getting made.
Seriously.
Yeah, I don't know. Definitely a lot of big things that circle around Fitz, and theoretically he could be destined for great things.
For sure.
But to do that, you have to be willing to not murder Justin in front of
and you have to be alive, and you have to be, a functioning human being. But
which is tough for Fitz.
Tough for Fitz, especially where we leave him at the end of this book, tough, but down,
a lot
but
of pages
not
left to try to
the story is like halfway through, basically, if you look at page count. So we got a long ways to go into book 3.
On the Wikipedia page under reception, it says mostly positive reviews. Of the book, Kirkus Review stated the novel is a spellbinding installment built of patient detail, believable characters, and mature plotting. Though, at an unwarranted 608 pages, there are ominous signs that Hobb's beginning to lose control of her narrative. Which is kind of hilarious. I don't think she's lost. I guess that's kind of what they're saying, though, is I assume that review was written before the final book came out.
Wait until they see book 3,
Right. Well, that happened a long time ago. I wonder if they thought she lost control of her narrative. I think that's a funny way of phrasing it, not entirely off, where you could be like, this was really good, but I'm slightly worried she's going to lose control of this narrative. And we'll have to see.
The fact that we know it's a long book, you're like, oh, maybe she did lose a little, control of like, right now I have to like retell a whole story now because I wiped the slate clean almost on some of the stuff, who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those books that, like, if you do read a Wikipedia summary of the things that happened, you're shocked that like so few things happened in that long a book.
Yeah.
Which there's other books that I've read that if you read the Wikipedia summary of those books, you'd be like, oh my God, so many things happened, but you don't care about any of them that much because they're just happening so fast and there's no development, and it's like,
I
who
think
cares
what
how
we're
long
getting,
it's
and
happened?
that's why I
didn't care about all
always
of them.
take that criticism of the series. I've had to take so much abuse of people criticizing the series, but I never think they're
Cry me a
wrong.
river.
I never think they were wrong, because it's always like, this is a conscious choice from Hobb. It's an investment, right? Like, it's meant to be long, and it's meant to be kind of, to put it in the words of that Wikipedia article you just read us, a patient detail. Like, we are mature plotting. These are the things that we're building up towards. We get these payoffs, these emotional vulnerability moments are built off the back of all of that investment in reading we've had to get here. You can only suffer with Fitz by the end of this book, having read through so much of his story to get there. It's one thing to say he was, captured, beaten, killed. It's another thing to watch all the people leave in his life and know what that's like, because you've been with him so intimately for so long. I don't think you can get there without that kind of depth.
Well said. And I would say that the Kingkiller Chronicle, which we keep referencing, is also a book that you would look at the length.
Those books are probably both longer than any of these books.
By a substantial amount. Although maybe, I would say maybe the third book here is
close.
Not much. Yeah, it's probably pretty close to The Name of the Wind. I think Wise Man's Fear is even longer, so that's got to be the longest of all of them. But yeah, I would say also falls in the category of a book that if you read the Wikipedia summary, you'd be like, not that much happens in this really long book. But it's these authors who, A, have amazing prose, and B, have an ability to slowly unfold things and also give you basically a character study at the same time as telling a story. And there's just very few books that I could name that come anywhere close to giving such a clear character study of any individual character to the same extent. I mean, even like, I think Joe Abercrombie writes like the best characters in the game, basically, but he's never written a book that is so tied to one particular character and their experience in the way that, if he did, I'm sure that would be unbelievable. And that would be like, I could only imagine how great a character study that would be. But if you want the experience of getting to know one particular character at such an intimate level and understanding them so deeply in a way that's rare in fiction, I mean, how can you beat Hobb's Farseer Trilogy when it comes to that?
Yeah, you really can't. And on the flip side, if you're not looking for that and that's what you stumble into, it may not be the cup of tea. But for me, it's like, this is such a rewarding experience. When we read so much fantasy back to back to back, it's like, to see a story like this told with such mastery. And that's the thing. Every passage I read, I'm like, wow, so good. It's exactly like reading Patrick Rothfuss, where you're just like, this is just like so brilliant. They're just on all the time. They could be writing about anything, and you just feel moved by it in some way. And that is, it's a rare thing. And now, like, this second book, Royal Assassin, it ends on such an interesting note. It's almost like a rebirth, right? Basically, and just to see where the story's going to go, and
weird, like a bastard looking like they died and then being reborn. I mean, have we ever seen anything else like that? Hard to say. Hard to say without spoiling.
With a wolf companion? No, not
a wolf companion.
With a
we've maybe seen it, but we've never seen it with a wolf companion. That's a great point, Charles.
With a wolf companion.
If that ever happened, maybe it happened later than this book. So
that's true. This book is paving the way for bastard wolf companion rebirths potentially, but we don't know too many.
But it hasn't happened.
Yeah, there's others. We haven't checked everything, but it would be really unlikely.
Probably in very obscure works. nothing big or anything like that.
No, this is not a motif that the fantasy genre ships that often. Okay, like that, so
wolf companion, bastard, resurrections. I mean, got to be one of a kind. It's so like niche, right?
Yep. Of a royal family, like royal bloodline kind of thing. Like, no, just doesn't happen. A catalyst in the fate of the world.
And if it did happen in a later book, you'd think people would be like, wait, they copied Farseer
and we're talking
Trilogy.
like not even a decade later, and you're like, that's kind of weird. Well, actually, no, because sometimes some of these things are shown in video form before the books come out, and you're like, oh, okay, sometimes. Well, we don't know.
That's true. That's
true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Some things we can pretty confidently say then that nothing like this that we know of has been written in a book.
No.
Besides this book.
That's right. Anything that would be written after this, would you be like, that's kind of interesting. I see the influence here. The influence. But we're certainly going to leave inspired now, and I think the only thing left to do is, go back and start reading the big book that is book 3, and before that, we got to play the sweet outro music. What do you say?
Assassin's Quest.
That's right. I always get the names of these books confused. One, because I'm reading the omnibus, so I'm never even aware of the title. But I also just think these titles sell the book so short. We got A Wise Man's Fear, The Name of the Wind. A title like that would have been so much more warranted than Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, Assassin's Quest. Like the fact that he's an assassin is such an
it's
minute part of what we're dealing with right now. A more poetic, longer title, I think, would have served these books so well. But would they have sold? Who knows? It was another time.
It was another time. I do think we talked about this in greater detail in Assassin's Apprentice, in our episode covering Assassin's Apprentice. But yeah, there's clearly a misalignment between what the titles were trying to convey and then what the books are actually like in terms of the title sounds actiony. The books are introspective and mature plotting. So it's kind of selling it short, but also selling it incorrectly.
Just like a mismarketing thing, They were trying to just grab
It was the 90s.
It was the 90s, guys. People were just calling things. It was like they invented the 2-word title, and it was the hottest thing, Now everyone has a 2-word title, and here we are. But no, it's great. It's great. I wonder if Robin Hobb named the books, or if how sometimes it's rare for an author to have. I wonder if she even likes the names.
That would be an interesting question if we could ever ask her.
That would be an interesting question.
Because you're right about the Name of the Wind is a title that just aligns so well with the story being told.
The Way of the Wolf or something, The Name of the Wolf, whatever. It would have been cooler than whatever this was. Wolf in the title would have been cool too. Better than Assassin. Yeah,
the assassin thing is tertiary to what's going on with Fitz and his identity.
Yes, not even 100%. If you were thinking you were reading an assassin book, you'd be very disappointed.
Now they'd call it the wolf, something with wolf and bastard, but because you could put bastard in now.
Yeah, that may have been too. That'd have been a little edgy.
In 90s, it's too edgy.
All right, well, what do you say, Dylan? I think we've exhausted our conversation here, and let's get that.
I think we've exhausted you, Charles.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say that last bit did put you over the edge. Let's get that sweet outro music pumping.
All right. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, if you want to support the show or keep that conversation going, reach out to us over on social media. That's at the FTF Podcast on Instagram and at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end on Twitter. Now, Dylan, if you like what you... X is basically run by Regal. I'm going to say that right now. While we're buried in the end of the episode, Regal and the owner of X are like the same person. And so, with that...
I don't think Regal's as vain as that person, Charles. Let's give Regal a little bit of credit here.
He did rebrand the Farseer crest, though. He totally rebranded that. But before we... wrap it up, Dylan. If they like what they heard today, if they want to support the show even more than following us on social media, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast, which you can do over on Spotify. Just 2 clicks over at the top of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast feed. It helps us so much when you do that. You can also rate and or review on Apple Podcasts. If you write a review, that will put a smile on my face and presumably on Charles's face as well. But just listening is more than enough.
You presume correctly, Dylan. Smiles are had, and just by listening, we're grinning ear to ear. So thank you all so much for listening. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go forth and conquer, friends.